High Admiral Zexkar clicked his mandibles in satisfaction as he reviewed the surveillance reports from Sector 7739. The small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star had finally caught the Confederation's attention, and not in a good way. "These humans are becoming troublesome," he muttered to his aide, a thin-limbed Vortakian named Chill. "Look at this data. 50 years ago, they barely had chemical rockets. Now they have fusion drives and orbital shipyards." Kill's large eyes blinked rapidly as he scanned the holographic display. The progression was indeed alarming. The humans had gone from splitting atoms to building crude starships in less than a century. By galactic standards, this was impossibly fast. "Should we classify them as a potential threat, Admiral?" Kill asked. Zexkar's laugh was a harsh, buzzing sound. "Threat? These primitives? They haven't even left their home system yet. No, Kill. This is simply a case of uncontrolled development. Like a virus that spreads too quickly for its own good. The Galactic Confederation had ruled over 3,000 star systems for nearly 10,000 years. They had seen species like humanity before, young races that showed promise but lacked wisdom. The secret to galactic peace was simple: keep everyone at roughly the same technological level, advanced enough to contribute to the Confederation, but not advanced enough to challenge it. "What do our xenobiologists say about their psychology?" Zexkar asked. Kill brought up another file. "Standard mammalian aggression patterns, but within acceptable ranges. They fight among themselves frequently, which actually makes them easier to manage. Their governments are fragmented, no unified planetary authority. The analysis suggests they would submit to Confederation oversight within a standard year if properly motivated. Zexkar savored the word. The Confederation had many ways to motivate unruly species. Economic pressure usually worked. Technological restrictions were effective too. But sometimes a more direct approach was needed. He studied the tactical display showing Earth's orbital infrastructure. 3 large space stations, dozens of smaller ones, and nearly 100 ships of various sizes. It wasn't much by Confederation standards, but it represented decades of human effort and trillions of their primitive currency units. "How many ships would we need to disable their space capabilities?" he asked his tactical officer, a 4-armed Nexilian called Torv. Torv's multiple hands danced over his console. 6 destroyers would be sufficient, Admiral. Their weapons are crude kinetic projectiles and early-stage energy beams. Our shields could handle their entire fleet simultaneously. And casualties? Minimal on our side. As for the humans, Torv paused. The orbital stations are heavily populated. Civilian workers, their families. The shipyards employ several 100,000 individuals. If we target the infrastructure directly, I didn't ask for a moral evaluation, Torv. I asked for numbers. Estimated human casualties would be between 50 and 70,000, depending on shift rotations and evacuation procedures. Zexkar nodded approvingly. It was a significant number for the humans, but negligible by galactic standards. The Confederation had suppressed species before. Sometimes you had to break a few eggs to maintain order. "What's our justification?" Kill asked. "Even routine operations required proper documentation, uncontrolled technological development posing a potential threat to regional stability," Zexkar replied without hesitation. "Standard Form 77B. File it under preventive maintenance." The irony wasn't lost on him. The humans had no idea they were being watched. They certainly had no idea their rapid progress had been deemed unacceptable by a galactic government they didn't even know existed. They were about to be punished for the crime of being too successful too quickly. 3 days later, Admiral Zexkar stood on the bridge of the Confederation destroyer Righteous Purpose as it dropped out of hyperspace, at the edge of the Sol system. 5 other destroyers materialized alongside his flagship, their sleek forms designed to inspire awe and terror in equal measure. "Begin the operation," he commanded. The attack was swift and clinical. The destroyers moved through space like predators, among sheep. Human sensor arrays designed to watch for asteroids and comets were completely blind to Confederation stealth technology. The orbital stations never saw death approaching. The first target was Luna Station, humanity's pride and joy. The massive rotating wheel housed nearly 30,000 people and served as the primary construction facility for their interstellar vessels. Zexkar watched impassively as concentrated plasma beams reduced it to expanding clouds of vapor and debris. Mars Orbital followed moments later. The smaller facility exploded in a brilliant flash that briefly outshone the red planet below. Emergency broadcasts filled human communication channels as panicked voices tried to understand what was happening. "Sir," Torv reported, "the humans are launching their defensive fleet." On the tactical display, dozens of human ships were accelerating toward the destroyers. Their largest vessel was barely the size of a Confederation corvette, and their weapons were laughably primitive. But they came anyway, like insects attacking a flame. "How quaint," Zexkar observed. "They think they can fight us." The human fleet lasted 18 minutes. Their ships were well built for their technology level, and their crews showed admirable courage. But courage couldn't overcome the fundamental laws of physics. Confederation shields absorbed their attacks effortlessly, while return fire carved through human vessels like a blade through tissue. The final target was Earth Orbital 1, the oldest and largest of humanity's space stations. Home to 40,000 people. It served as both a gateway to space and a symbol of human achievement. Zexkar permitted himself a moment of satisfaction as it joined its sister stations in destruction. "Mission accomplished, Admiral," Torv reported. "All primary targets destroyed. Human space capability reduced by approximately 87%. Excellent. Signal the fleet to withdraw." As the destroyers prepared to enter hyperspace, Zexkar took one last look at the blue-white planet hanging in the void. Radio transmissions from its surface painted a picture of chaos and confusion. World leaders demanding answers, military forces on highest alert, scientists frantically trying to analyze the debris for clues about their attackers. "Admiral," Kill said quietly. "What, if they attempt retaliation?" Zexkar's mandibles clicked in amusement. "With what? We just destroyed their space fleet. It will take them decades to rebuild, assuming they ever do. More likely, this demonstration will convince them to abandon their expansion efforts entirely." Destroyers vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind only wreckage and questions. In the Confederation capital, the operation would be filed away as a minor success. Another primitive species properly educated about their place in the galactic order. Zexkar had no way of knowing that he had just made the worst mistake in the Confederation's 10,000-year history. He couldn't have imagined that instead of crushing human ambition, he had given it focus. The scattered competitive nations of Earth were about to discover they had something far more dangerous than individual nationalism. They were about to discover they were human, and being human, it turned out, meant something very different than the Confederation's databases suggested. President Sarah Chen stood in the emergency session of the United Nations Security Council, her hands trembling slightly as she held the preliminary analysis report. Around the circular table, the faces of world leaders reflected the same mixture of shock, anger, and determination that had consumed her for the past 72 hours. "The debris analysis is conclusive," she announced to the silent room. "The weapons that destroyed our orbital stations use technology we don't understand. Energy projection systems that operate on principles we haven't even theorized yet. Hull, materials with molecular structures that shouldn't be possible." Prime Minister Viktor Petrov of the Russian Federation leaned forward. "What are you saying, Madam President, that we were attacked by aliens?" "That's exactly what I'm saying." Chen's voice was steady now, the initial shock replaced by cold resolve. The wreckage contains isotopes that don't exist naturally in our solar system. The attack patterns were too coordinated for any known technology. And the precision... She paused, looking at each leader in turn. They hit exactly what they wanted. To hit. No more, no less. Chancellor Emma Richter of the European Union spoke up. The death toll stands at 68,000 confirmed, with another 12,000 missing and presumed dead. These aliens, they murdered 80,000 human beings without warning, without provocation, without even announcing their presence. The Chinese premier, Liu Wei, was studying a tablet with grim concentration. Our military analysts have reached the same conclusion. This was not an invasion. It was a demonstration. They wanted to cripple our space capabilities while leaving our planet intact. But why? Asked President Amara Okafor of the African Federation. What could we have possibly done to provoke such an attack? Dr. James Morrison, the head of NASA, cleared his throat. If I may, world leaders, I believe I know why. All eyes turned to the elderly scientist. In the past 50 years, humanity has made unprecedented leaps in space technology. We've gone from chemical rockets to fusion drives, from metal hulls to metamaterial composites, from single-planet habitation to building true starships. So maybe someone out there doesn't want us to advance that quickly. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. General Patricia Hayes, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, was the first to speak. You're suggesting they attacked us to keep us primitive. I'm suggesting they attacked us because we were becoming less primitive, Morrison replied. And that means one very important thing. They're afraid of what we might become. President Chen stood up slowly. Then we need to become exactly what they're afraid of. The next 6 hours changed the course of human history. Traditional national boundaries dissolved as leaders hammered out the framework for something unprecedented. A unified global government with a single purpose. The Earth Defense Authority was born not from idealism, but from necessity. Within a week, the most brilliant minds from every nation were working together in underground facilities that had been built in secret during the Cold War. Scientists, who had spent their careers competing for funding and recognition, now shared everything freely. Engineers who had been developing weapons to use against each other turned their skills toward a common enemy. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a materials scientist from Tokyo, found herself working alongside Dr. Roberto Silva from São Paulo and Dr. Aisha Patel from Mumbai. 3 months earlier, they had been strangers. Now they were part of a team racing to understand alien technology. The hull fragments are incredible, Tanaka explained as she manipulated a holographic display. The atomic structure adjusts dynamically to incoming forces. It's not just armor, it's adaptive armor. Silva nodded excitedly. And look at this energy residue from their weapons. It's not plasma, it's not lasers. It's something that converts matter directly into energy at the point of impact. But the conversion is controlled, targeted, which means it can be replicated. Patel added, given enough time and resources were exactly what humanity had decided to provide. The global economy restructured itself almost overnight. Consumer goods became secondary priorities. Entertainment industries pivoted to supporting the war effort. Every government's primary budget item became a single line, species survival. In Detroit, General Motors retooled their factories to produce spacecraft components. In Seoul, Samsung's semiconductor facilities began working around the clock to develop new computing systems. In Mumbai, pharmaceutical companies shifted their research toward life support systems for long-duration space travel. But the most significant changes were happening in places the aliens couldn't see. Deep underground, humanity was building something that had never existed before. Industrial facilities designed to operate in absolute secrecy. Mile-long manufacturing complexes buried beneath mountains. Shipyards carved out of solid rock. Research laboratories that could survive nuclear attacks. We have to assume they're watching, General Hayes explained to her staff. Everything we do on the surface, everything they can detect from orbit has to look normal. Broken, defeated. The real work happens where they can't see it. The strategy was working. Satellite imagery showed human governments struggling to rebuild their shattered space program. Public broadcasts were filled with calls for international aid and cooperation to address the asteroid impact that had destroyed the orbital stations. The official story was holding, at least for now. Underground, the truth was very different. Captain Maria Santos stood in the cavernous Assembly Bay 7, watching as the first prototype of humanity's new starship took shape. It didn't look like anything humans had built before. The design incorporated reverse-engineered alien technology with human engineering principles that the aliens had apparently never considered. "How long until it's operational?" asked Dr. Chen, who had transitioned from president to director of Advanced Projects. 6 months for this prototype, Santos replied. But we're building 27 of them simultaneously. Different designs, different approaches. We're not putting all our eggs in one basket. The ship before them was sleek and predatory. Nothing like the bulky industrial vessels humanity had been building just months before. Its hull incorporated the adaptive materials they'd learned from alien wreckage. Its weapons were based on energy conversion principles that human physicists were only beginning to understand. But the most important innovation was invisible. Hidden throughout the ship were communication systems, sensor arrays, and data storage units that would allow it to share everything it learned with every other human vessel. The aliens had attacked humanity's space infrastructure, but they had also inadvertently given humanity something far more valuable, a reason to unite. "There's something else," Santos continued. "The psychological profiles of our volunteer crews are interesting. These people aren't motivated by exploration or scientific curiosity. They're motivated by something much more basic, which is revenge, Doctor." Chen nodded grimly. She had read the same reports. The crews volunteering for the most dangerous missions weren't professional soldiers or trained astronauts. They were civilian engineers who had lost family members in the orbital attacks. Scientists whose life's work had been vaporized in an instant. Ordinary people who had been transformed by the simple knowledge that someone out there considered human life expendable. "That's not necessarily a bad thing," she said. "Revenge is a powerful motivator, and unlike fear or anger, it doesn't fade with time. If anything, it grows stronger." As they spoke, similar scenes were playing out in facilities around the world. In the Urals, Russian engineers were developing new propulsion systems. In the Australian outback, joint teams were building advanced sensor arrays. In the Amazon rainforest, vast underground farms were being established to support long-duration space missions. Humanity was preparing for war, not the kind of war they had known throughout their history, limited conflicts over territory or resources. This was something different. This was a war for the right to exist as a spacefaring species. The aliens had made a calculation that a sharp, decisive blow would convince humanity to abandon their expansion into space. They had based this calculation on their understanding of primitive species that could be intimidated by superior technology. They had not accounted for one crucial factor: humanity's relationship with extinction. Other species, when faced with an existential threat, would submit or flee. Humans, when faced with extinction, became something else entirely. They became predators. Admiral Zexkar was reviewing routine patrol reports when his aide Kill burst into his office without announcement. The Vortakian's normally pale skin had turned an alarming shade of green. "Admiral, we have a problem. A big problem." Zexkar looked up from his data pad with irritation. "What could possibly be so urgent that you forget basic protocol?" "It's the humans, sir. They're not supposed to be doing this." Kill activated the office's holographic display, showing a tactical, map of Confederation space. Red markers indicated the locations of recent incidents, and there were far too many of them. 15 supply convoys attacked in the past 2 months, Kill reported, his voice shaking. 4 mining operations completely destroyed. 3 slave processing facilities liberated. And sir, none of our ships have been able to catch them. Zexkar stared at the display in disbelief. That's impossible. We destroyed their space capability 18 months ago. Our surveillance shows they're still struggling to rebuild basic orbital infrastructure. That's what we thought too, sir. But look at this. The display shifted to show security footage from the attack on mining station Helix 7. Zexkar watched as sleek, predatory ships emerged from what appeared to be empty space. They moved with an efficiency he had never seen before, striking specific targets with surgical precision before vanishing again. How many ships? He asked. Unknown, sir. They appear, attack, and disappear. Our sensor arrays can't track them once they engage some kind of stealth system. But Admiral... Kill paused. The ships don't look human. What do you mean? I mean they're using our technology, hull materials that match our specifications, energy weapons based on our designs. But the engineering is different. Better. Zexkar felt his mandibles clicking involuntarily, a sign of stress he hadn't experienced in decades. Show me the weapon signatures. The next series of displays made his situation clear. The mysterious attackers were using energy conversion weapons that operated on the same principles as Confederation technology, but with improvements that shouldn't have been possible. Their targeting systems were more accurate. Their power output was higher. Their efficiency was beyond anything in the Confederation's arsenal. Sir, Kill continued, there's something else. The liberated facilities. The slaves weren't just freed. They were recruited. Recruited for what? Unknown. But we've lost contact with over 300,000 beings from various species. They've simply vanished. The communication system on Zexkar's desk chimed, with an urgent priority signal. The familiar face of High Command appeared on the screen, and Zexkar could see the strain in his superior's expression. Admiral, the voice was terse and controlled. Report to Central Command immediately. We have a situation. 24 hours later, Zexkar found himself in a conference room with the highest levels of Confederation leadership. The atmosphere was tense in a way he had never experienced before. Supreme Admiral Corthon, the highest military authority in the Confederation, stood before a massive tactical display showing their entire territory. Red markers indicated recent attacks, and the pattern was becoming clear. In the past 6 months, Corthon began, we have lost more assets to unknown attackers than we lost in the entire rebellion of the Outer Rim 3 centuries ago. The attackers are systematic, intelligent, and completely invisible to our detection systems. Defense Minister Yextal, a massive Krogian whose species had never known defeat in battle, stepped forward. Our intelligence suggests these attacks are not random. The targets have been carefully chosen. Supply lines that support our expansion efforts, mining operations in contested territories, slave facilities that house our most valuable workers. And most disturbing of all, added Intelligence Director Velthara, the freed slaves are not returning to their home worlds. They are joining the attackers. Zexkar felt his stomach drop. Joining them? You mean cooperating? We mean converting, Velthara replied coldly. Every species we have civilized over the past 1,000 years is suddenly sharing intelligence about our operations, our weaknesses, our patrol routes. We are facing a coalition of every primitive species in our territory. But that's impossible, Zexkar protested. These species barely understand space travel. They have no military coordination, no unified command structure. They do now. Supreme Admiral Corthon activated a new display showing intercepted communications. The signals were encrypted with mathematical principles that Confederation computers couldn't break, but the transmission patterns told a story of their own. Coordinated fleet movements across 17 star systems, Corthon explained. resource, sharing between species that have never even met each other, joint military operations involving technologies from dozens of different civilizations. Someone is organizing them. The humans? Zexkar said quietly. The humans, Corthan confirmed. The species you assured us would be properly motivated by a simple demonstration of superior force. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. The Confederation had spent millennia maintaining control through a simple strategy. Keep potential enemies divided and primitive. Never allow them to unite. Never let them share technology. Never give them a reason to cooperate. The attack on Earth had accomplished the exact opposite of its intended goal. What do we know about their capabilities? Asked Defense Minister Yextal. Intelligence Director Velthara brought up a new series of reports. Based on debris analysis from the few engagements where we've inflicted damage, they've somehow reverse-engineered our technology and improved upon it. Their ships are faster, more maneuverable, and more heavily armed than anything in our fleet. How is that possible? Zexkar demanded. We gave them a few hull fragments and weapon residue. That's not enough to rebuild an entire technology base. Unless, Velthara said slowly, they didn't start from fragments. Unless they started from intact systems. The horrible realization hit everyone in the room simultaneously. The humans hadn't just analyzed the wreckage from their destroyed stations. They had salvaged intact technology from the attack itself. The weapon systems, Zexkar whispered. When we destroyed their stations, some of our energy beams passed through the structures without fully dissipating. The humans could have captured and analyzed the beam generators themselves. And the hull fragments contained complete molecular matrices, added Yextal. They didn't just learn what our materials were made of, they learned how to make them. Supreme Admiral Corthan turned to face the assembled leadership. We are dealing with a species that views warfare differently than any we have encountered. They don't fight for territory or resources. They don't seek to conquer or subjugate. They fight for extinction or survival with no middle ground. What do you recommend? Asked the defense minister. Total war. Immediate mobilization of the entire Confederation fleet. We end this before it spreads further. And if we fail? Corthan's expression was grim. Then we will have created the very thing our ancestors feared most when they founded the Confederation, a species capable of uniting the galaxy against us. As the meeting continued, none of the Confederation leaders noticed the small probe maintaining position just outside their detection range. The device was so advanced that it appeared to be nothing more than a piece of space debris, indistinguishable from the thousands of asteroids that drifted through the system. But deep inside its hull, sophisticated recording equipment was capturing every word, every tactical display, every strategic plan. The probe's quantum communication system transmitted this intelligence instantaneously across hundreds of light years to a hidden facility in the asteroid belt of an unremarkable star system. There, human analysts studied the Confederation's plans, with the same methodical precision their ancestors had once used to hunt mammoths. They were learning their enemies' weaknesses, their fears, their decision-making processes. The Confederation thought they were dealing with a primitive species that had stumbled onto advanced technology. They had no idea they were being systematically studied, analyzed, and outmaneuvered by creatures who had spent their entire evolutionary history becoming the most dangerous predators their planet had ever produced. The hunt was no longer just beginning. The hunt was already over. The Confederation just didn't know they were the prey yet. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as her tactical display showed the systematic dismantling of Confederation Outpost Gamma 9. Around her, the crew worked with the silent efficiency that had become humanity's. Trademark. No celebration, no excitement, just cold professional destruction. Target their communication array first, she ordered. Standard protocol. The Retribution's energy weapons lanced out with surgical precision, severing the outpost's connection to the Confederation fleet. This had become humanity's signature, Move, isolate, disable, extract intelligence, then vanish. The Confederation never got warnings anymore. Their reinforcements always arrived to find empty space and scattered debris. "Ma'am," called Lieutenant Chen from the sensor station, "we're detecting 1,700 life forms aboard the station. Mixed species. Looks like standard slave labor composition. Begin liberation protocols. Within minutes, smaller human." Vessels were docking with the Confederation outpost. These weren't military ships. They were purpose-built rescue and conversion platforms. Each one carried medical teams, translators, and most importantly, representatives from every species humanity had encountered. This was the strategy that had transformed the war from a simple conflict between two species into something far more dangerous for the Confederation. Every liberated slave became a teacher, sharing the weaknesses and secrets of their former masters. Every rescued species became a recruiting ground for the growing coalition. "Captain," reported the communications. "Officer, we're receiving surrender signals from the station commander." "Standard response," Vasquez replied without emotion. The standard response had been developed by human psychologists working with alien refugees. It was carefully designed to maximize the psychological impact on Confederation forces. The message was always the same, delivered in perfect Confederation standard. "This is the Human Liberation Fleet. Your facility has been designated for freedom operations. Surrender your weapons and prepare for processing. Resistance will be met with proportional force. You have 10 minutes to comply." What made the message so effective wasn't its content. It was its tone. Cold, professional, inevitable. The CO. Confederation had spent millennia projecting exactly this kind of authority over primitive species. Having it used against them was psychologically devastating. "Sir," Lieutenant Chen continued, "long-range sensors are detecting a Confederation response fleet. 12 destroyers, ETA 43 minutes. More than enough time." Vasquez turned to her executive officer. "Commander Park, begin Phase 2. Phase 2 was the part of human operations that the Confederation still didn't understand. Instead of fleeing before reinforcements arrived, the humans would often stay and fight. But they didn't fight like any military force the Confederation had ever encountered. Human ships would split into small groups and attack from multiple directions simultaneously. They would target specific systems with devastating precision: life support, navigation, weapons, leaving Confederation vessels crippled but not destroyed. The crews would then be forced to watch as human boarding parties took their ships, apart piece by piece. It wasn't just military tactics, it was psychological warfare designed to break the enemy's will to fight. "Ma'am, liberation teams report complete success. All slaves have been extracted and are requesting asylum with our fleet." "Granted. Signal the convoy to prepare for hyperspace." But today was different. Today, Captain Vasquez had additional orders that came directly from the human high command. Today, they weren't just liberating slaves and gathering intelligence. Today, they were sending a message. "Sir, the Confederation response fleet has arrived," reported Lieutenant Chen. "They're hailing us. Put them through." The main screen activated, showing the familiar form of a Confederation admiral. His mandibles were clicking rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation that human intelligence had learned to recognize. "Unknown vessels!" The admiral's voice was shaking with barely controlled rage. "You are in violation of Confederation space. Withdraw immediately or face destruction." Captain Vasquez smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Admiral, this is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Human Liberation Fleet. We have completed our operations here. You are free to recover your outpost." "Human?" The Admiral's eyes widened. "Impossible. We destroyed your space capability years ago." "You destroyed some orbital stations," Vasquez corrected. "You also murdered 80,000 civilians." "We remember." The transmission ended, and the human fleet began its departure. But instead of the quick hyperspace jump the Confederation expected, something different happened. "Ma'am," reported the tactical officer, "all ships are reporting ready for demonstration protocol." Vasquez nodded. The demonstration protocol had been developed specifically for moments like this. The Confederation needed to understand that their technological superiority was no longer guaranteed. Execute. What happened next would be analyzed by Confederation military strategists for months afterward. The human fleet didn't flee. Instead, they turned and engaged the Confederation destroyers in direct combat. But this wasn't the desperate last stand the Admiral expected. It was a carefully choreographed display of overwhelming technological superiority. Human ships moved through space like dancers, their adaptive hulls shifting to deflect incoming fire, while their weapons carved through Confederation shields as if they didn't exist. Energy beams that should have destroyed human vessels were absorbed and redirected. Missiles that should have crippled their engines were intercepted by defensive systems that operated faster than Confederation targeting. Computers could track. In 18 minutes, 12 Confederation destroyers were reduced to drifting hulks. Their crews were alive but helpless, watching as human ships systematically dismantled their vessels for salvage. "Admiral," Captain Vasquez's voice came over the emergency communication channel, "tell your superiors that we are no longer the species you attacked 3 years ago. Tell them that every day they continue their oppression of other species, we become stronger. Tell them that we have united every race you have ever enslaved, and we are teaching them what freedom means." The Admiral stared at his tactical display in shock. His entire fleet had been neutralized without a single human casualty. What do you want?" "We want you to remember this moment," Vasquez replied. "We want you to understand that humanity doesn't forget, we don't forgive, and we don't stop." The human fleet vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind wreckage and a message that would spread throughout Confederation space faster than any official communication. Humanity was no longer hiding. 3 months later, the effects of the new human strategy were becoming clear throughout Confederation territory. Species that had been enslaved for centuries were openly rebelling. Entire star systems were declaring independence. The carefully maintained balance of power that had kept the Confederation stable for millennia was collapsing. Supreme Admiral Corthan stood in the Central Command reviewing reports that grew worse each day. The humans weren't just fighting a war, they were systematically dismantling the foundation of Confederation society. "The economic projections are catastrophic," reported his aide. 16 major industrial systems have gone offline. Our supply chains are collapsing. The slave labor force that supports our infrastructure is either freed or in active rebellion. What about our fleet response? Ineffective, sir. Every engagement with human forces results in either heavy casualties or complete defeat. Our shipyards can't replace vessels fast enough to match our losses. Corthan studied the strategic display with growing dread. The red markers indicating human activity now covered nearly a third of Confederation space, but worse than the territorial losses was what the intelligence reports revealed about human capabilities. "They're not just winning battles," he said quietly. "They're learning from every engagement. Every ship we lose, every tactic we employ, every technological advantage we reveal, they adapt to it within weeks. Sir, there's something else. The psychological evaluation reports from our surviving crews." Corthan reviewed the data with mounting horror. Confederation forces weren't just being defeated, they were being traumatized. Veterans who had served for decades were requesting transfers to non-combat positions. Some were refusing to engage human ships entirely. "They're breaking our military's will to fight," he realized. "This isn't just conquest. It's psychological warfare designed to destroy our capacity to resist." The communication system chimed with an urgent message from the Confederation Council. When the transmission activated, Corthan found himself looking at the worried faces of the most powerful beings in known space. "Admiral," The council speaker's voice was strained. "We need immediate recommendations. The situation is spiraling beyond our control." "The situation is already beyond our control," Corthan replied, bluntly. "We are no longer dealing with a primitive species that stumbled onto advanced technology. We are dealing with creatures who view warfare as an extension of evolution. Every battle makes them stronger. Every defeat teaches them something new." "What do you recommend?" Corthan was quiet for a long moment. "Negotiation." "Negotiation?" The council speaker's voice rose in disbelief. "With primitives!" "These are not primitives," Corthan said quietly. "These are predators. And—" Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the Terra's Wrath, watching as the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled moved through hyperspace toward the Confederation capital system. Around her, the viewports showed an endless procession of ships, not just human vessels, but representatives from every species the Confederation had ever enslaved. The Krillian Empire had contributed their knowledge of Confederation shield technology. The Vegan Republic had provided detailed maps of the capital system's defenses. The Centauri Alliance had shared their expertise in energy weapons. Dozens of species, united for the first time in galactic history by a simple shared goal: freedom. "Admiral," reported Captain Martinez from the tactical station, "final fleet count is confirmed. 12,000 combat vessels, 4,000 support ships, and nearly 3 million liberated beings ready to reclaim their freedom." Chen nodded, still staring out at the fleet. 3 years ago, she had been President of the United States, dealing with budget disputes and trade negotiations. Now, she commanded the largest military force in galactic history, preparing to end a 10,000-year-old empire. The transformation hadn't been easy. Humanity had paid a terrible price for their rapid advancement. Entire generations had grown up knowing nothing but preparation for war. Earth's population had been mobilized into the largest industrial effort in human history. Personal freedoms had been suspended in favor of species survival, but it had worked. The creatures who had dismissed humanity as primitive mammals had created something they never imagined possible: a united, technologically advanced, militarily sophisticated species with a single-minded focus on their destruction. "Time to target?" 47 minutes until we reach the outer defenses of the Mortal system. The Confederation capital was protected by defensive installations that had been built over millennia. Energy shields that could deflect asteroid impacts. Weapons platforms capable of destroying entire fleets. Fortress stations manned by the elite of Confederation military forces. It would have been an impregnable defense against any known military force. But humanity had spent 3 years studying Confederation technology, tactics, and psychology. They knew exactly how to break defenses that had never been seriously tested. "Signal from the advanced scouts," reported the communications officer. "The Confederation Defense Fleet is taking position around the capital world. Estimated strength, 800 vessels, including their newest dreadnoughts. Response from High Command? Proceed as planned. Show them what they created." The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Mortal system in perfect formation. For a moment, both forces simply stared at each other across the void. The Confederation defenders saw an impossibly large fleet of vessels using their own technology. The human forces saw the heart of an empire that had considered them insects. Supreme Admiral Corthan stood on the bridge of the Confederation flagship Eternal Dominion, watching the sensor readings with a mixture of awe and terror. The human fleet was larger than anything in recorded history, but more disturbing was the composition of that fleet. "Analysis confirms our worst fears," reported his tactical officer. "Those ships are using our hull materials, our energy systems, our propulsion technology. But the engineering signatures indicate improvements we can't match." "How many species are represented in that fleet?" 47 confirmed, sir. "Every major civilization we've brought under Confederation control in the past 1,000 years." Corthan closed his eyes briefly. The Confederation's strategy of divide and conquer had been turned completely against them. Instead of keeping potential enemies separated, they had given humanity a galaxy full of allies who shared detailed knowledge of Confederation weaknesses. Incoming transmission from the human fleet. The main screen activated, showing Admiral Chen's calm, professional face. Behind her, the bridge of the Terra's Wrath buzzed with quiet activity. Human efficiency had become legendary throughout the galaxy. No wasted motion, no unnecessary communication, no emotion that didn't serve a tactical purpose. Supreme Admiral Corthon. Chen's voice was polite and formal. I am Admiral Sarah, Chen of the Human Liberation Fleet. We are here to discuss the terms of the Confederation's surrender. Surrender? Corthon's mandibles clicked involuntarily. We have never surrendered to anyone. The Confederation has ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. The Confederation has oppressed this galaxy for 10,000 years, Chen corrected. That ends today. You cannot seriously believe you can defeat our entire military with a single battle. Chen's expression didn't change. Supreme Admiral, we're not here to defeat your military. We're here to liberate every enslaved being in, your territory and dismantle the systems that allowed your oppression to continue. Your military is simply in our way. The tactical displays on both ships showed the two fleets moving into engagement range. But instead of the chaotic rush that characterized most space battles, the human formation moved with mechanical precision. Each ship knew exactly where to be, when to fire, and how to support their allies. Admiral Chen, Corthon tried one final time. Surely we can negotiate. The Confederation is willing to discuss territorial adjustments, tribute payments, even limited autonomy for some species. The time for negotiation ended when you murdered 80,000 civilians, Chen replied. You taught us that the universe contains species who consider human life expendable. We've learned that lesson very well, the battle for the Confederation. Capital began with a demonstration that horrified every military strategist who witnessed it. The human fleet didn't charge the defensive positions or attempt to overwhelm them with superior numbers. Instead, they systematically dissected the Confederation defenses with surgical precision. Weapons platforms that had protected the capital for centuries were disabled by energy beams that penetrated their shields as if they didn't exist. Fortress stations were boarded and captured by assault teams that moved through their corridors like they had built-in blueprints. Defense fleet. Vessels found their own weapons turned against them as human cyber warfare specialists took control of their systems. This is impossible, whispered Corthon as he watched his impregnable defenses crumble. No species develops this quickly. No military force can coordinate on this scale. Sir, reported his aide, the humans are transmitting surrender terms to all remaining vessels. The terms were broadcast on all frequencies, in every language spoken by Confederation species. They were simple, non-negotiable, and completely unprecedented in galactic history. All enslaved beings will be immediately freed and provided with transportation to their home worlds or colonies of their choosing. All forced labor operations will cease permanently. All territorial expansion by force will end. The Confederation government will be dissolved and replaced by a voluntary alliance of species with equal representation. Any attempt to resist these terms will result in the complete destruction of Confederation military forces. They're not conquering us, Corthon realized with growing horror. They're dismantling us. The final battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Confederation fleet was completely destroyed, but something even more significant had occurred. The capital world's population, billions of beings from hundreds of species, had witnessed the systematic defeat of their supposed masters by the creatures they had been told were primitive animals. Admiral Chen stood in the Confederation Council chambers 3 days later, addressing the assembled representatives of every species in known space. The Grand Hall that had once symbolized Confederation dominance now hosted something unprecedented. A truly representative galactic government. The Galactic Liberation Alliance, she announced, will be founded on principles the Confederation never understood. voluntary membership, equal representation, mutual defense, and most importantly, the absolute right of every species to develop according to their own potential. And humanity's role in this alliance? Asked the former Confederation. Council Speaker, now stripped of authority but allowed to speak. Humanity will be one voice among many, Chen replied. We have no interest in ruling others. We've learned that forced control creates exactly the kind of resentment that destroyed your empire. But you have the largest fleet, the most advanced technology, which we will share freely with any species that requests it. The technological advancement that you tried to prevent will be available to everyone. No species will ever again be kept primitive for the convenience of others. As the council session continued, reports arrived from throughout the former Confederation territory. Slave worlds were declaring independence. Industrial systems were being converted from forced labor to free markets. Species that had been enemies for centuries were cooperating to rebuild their shattered civilizations. The transformation wasn't without problems. Some species struggled with sudden freedom after generations of oppression. Others had to learn how to govern themselves. A few attempted to establish their own mini-empires, only to discover that the human liberation fleet was as committed to preventing oppression as they had been to ending it. But the fundamental change was irreversible. The galaxy would never again accept the idea that one species could dominate all others.
The Centauri Federation had never known defeat. For 300 years they had spread across the galaxy, winning every battle with their better technology. Their crystal warships, powered by tiny black holes, could not be destroyed. Their smart computers could guess what enemies would do before they did it. The 9 leaders who lived forever had led them to win time after time, until they met the Krell. Admiral Lara Martinez looked at the glowing display, her dark eyes reflecting the red warning lights that filled the screen. The USS Dauntless floated above New Eden, the last big human colony in the Orion Arm. Only 78 ships remained from what was once a fleet of 300. "Admiral," said Commander Ben Harris, keeping his voice steady despite the bad situation. "Krell forces have broken through the outer defense line. They will start bombing the planet in about 6 hours. Lara nodded, her face showing no feeling. 20 years in the Space Force had taught her to hide her emotions, especially in front of her crew, but inside, she felt hopeless. The Krell had appeared 18 months ago, coming from an unmapped area of space. They were made of silicon instead of carbon, and their technology was unlike anything humans had seen before, and they never stopped attacking. "How is the evacuation going?" she asked. 30% done, answered Lieutenant Kate Winters from her spotted communications. "But at this rate, we'll only get about half the colonists out before the Krell get here. 15 million people lived on New Eden. Half meant over 7 million would die. After losing Proxima Centauri, after losing Tau Ceti, after losing New Washington, humanity couldn't handle another loss this big." "Send a message to Earth Command," Lara said. "Tell them New Eden is falling. Ask for help right away." The bridge was completely silent. Everyone knew no help would come. Earth's defenses were already stretched too thin. The Krell had pushed humanity to the edge of dying out. "Yes, Admiral," said Kate, her fingers moving across the control panel. As the message was sent, Lara turned to look at the blue-green planet below. New Eden had been humanity's biggest success story in space. Rich farmland, good weather, air people could breathe. It had taken 100 years to change it from a harsh world to paradise, and now it would fall in a day. "Commander Harris," she said quietly, "get all remaining ships ready for battle. We'll buy the people leaving as much time as we can." Ben nodded grimly. "Yes, Admiral." As the crew rushed to battle stations, Lara stayed at the window, watching the distant flashes of light that showed the ongoing battle at the edge of the system. Defeat was certain, but as long as a single human ship remained, they would fight. Tucker. Krell ships moved in perfect formation, their black hulls absorbing light rather than reflecting it. They looked like holes cut in space itself. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Lara had stopped counting after the first wave. "Enemy fighters approaching, Admiral," reported Officer Dan Kelly from the tactical station. "Estimated time, to weapons range, 3 minutes." Lara straightened her uniform. "All ships form defensive position Alpha. Protect the evacuation vessels at all costs." The remaining human ships moved into a sphere around the civilian transports that were still loading refugees from the planet. It was a textbook defensive formation, one the Krell had seen before and broken through easily. But this time, Lara had a plan. "Commander Harris, is the package ready?" she asked quietly. Ben nodded. "Yes, Admiral. Though I must say again, this goes against every rule of engagement in the book." "We're not fighting by the book anymore," Lara replied. "We're fighting for survival." The first wave of Krell fighters hit the human line with overwhelming force. Energy beams cut through space, finding their targets with computer precision. 3 human destroyers exploded in the first volley. "Return fire," Lara ordered. "All ships. Target the lead vessels only. Ignore the support craft." Human railguns and missile systems responded, filling space with projectiles and explosions. A few Krell ships took damage, but not enough to matter. "Admiral?" Kate called out. "I'm receiving distress signals from the surface. The Krell have landed ground forces in the southern hemisphere." Lara's jaw tightened. That wasn't supposed to happen yet. The Krell were adapting faster than expected. "How many evacuation ships have launched?" she asked. 17, Admiral, Ben reported. "Approximately 2 million civilians evacuated so far." "Not enough. Not nearly enough." "Admiral," Dan shouted. "Massive energy signature detected from the largest Krell vessel. They're charging their main weapon." This was it. The planet killer. The same weapon that had turned Proxima Centauri's colonies to ash. "Now, Commander," Lara said, her voice deadly calm. "Deploy the package." Ben hesitated for just a second, then pressed a sequence of commands into his console. From the cargo bay of the Dauntless, a small, unmarked probe launched, accelerating rapidly toward the Krell flagship. "What is that going to do against their shields?" Kate asked, confusion in her voice. "It's not designed to penetrate their shields," Lara explained. "It's designed to attract them." The probe emitted a signal, a perfect copy of the quantum signature used by Krell ships to identify each other. The effect was immediate and dramatic. "The Krell vessels are turning on each other," Dan exclaimed. "Their targeting systems think the flagship is an enemy." Chaos erupted in the Krell formation as smaller vessels opened fire on their own command ship. The massive flagship's shields flickered under the friendly fire. "All ships, target the flagship." "Now," Lara ordered. "Concentrate all firepower." The human fleet responded as one, every remaining weapon focusing on the same point in the Krell flagship's weakened shields. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a bloom of light erupted as the shields failed and human missiles found their mark. The Krell flagship didn't explode. It seemed to collapse in on itself, as if being consumed from within. "Direct hit on their command center," Ben reported, unable to keep the excitement from his voice. "Krell fleet is in disarray," Dan added. "Their formation is breaking apart." Lara allowed herself the smallest smile. "Push the advantage, all ships engage at will, get those evacuation vessels clear." As the human fleet pressed forward, something unprecedented happened. The Krell began to retreat. "They're falling back," Kate said in disbelief. "Admiral, they're actually withdrawing from the system." A cheer went up on the bridge, quickly silenced by Lara's raised hand. "This isn't over," she warned. "They'll be back and in greater numbers, but we've bought New Eden some time." She turned to Kate. "Send word to the surface. Continue evacuation at maximum capacity." As the Krell ships disappeared into the darkness of space, Lara allowed herself to truly look at the cost. More than half her fleet was gone. Thousands of good people lost. But they had done the impossible. They had forced the Krell to retreat. It wasn't a victory, not really, but it was hope. And right now, hope was all humanity had left. Colonel Frank Donnelly stood in the rain, watching as the last transport ship took off from Camp Valor. The muddy ground shook under his boots as the huge engines pushed against Earth's gravity. Another 5,000 soldiers gone, sent to the front lines in a war humanity was losing. That's the third group this month, said Major Olivia Pierce, coming to stand beside him. Her uniform was soaked through, but she didn't seem to notice. At this rate, we'll have sent every soldier we have within 6 months. Frank nodded, his weathered face serious beneath his short gray hair. And still not enough. The Krell had taken New Eden 3 weeks ago. Before that, it had been Tau Ceti, New Washington, and a dozen other colonies. Humanity had been pushed back to Earth and a few nearby settlements. The experts thought that at current loss rates the war would be over within a year. Let's get out of this rain, Frank said, turning toward the command bunker. Inside, the Situation Room was busy with activity. Officers moved between stations, their faces tired from lack of sleep. On the main screen, a live map showed the shrinking borders of human space with red marks showing Krell advances. Suddenly, every screen in the room flickered. The battle maps disappeared, replaced by static. What the hell? Frank muttered. The static cleared, showing the face of a woman. Her skin was pale, her eyes a bright purple. Behind her, strange symbols moved across a curved wall. This message is for the leaders of Earth, she said, her voice with a slight accent. I am Ambassador Ilara of the Arcadian Alliance. We have been watching your fight with the Krell Empire. Frank felt his heart beat faster. In 300 years of space, travel, humanity had met only 4 alien species, and the Krell had been the 4th. The Krell have destroyed 17 civilizations in the last 1,000 years, Ilara continued. They are a predatory species that consumes everything in their path. No single power has been able to stop them. She paused. But your species fights differently. The ambassador leaned forward. Your defense of New Eden should have lasted hours. It lasted 17 days. Your battle plans are unusual. Your soldiers keep fighting long after our strategic models predict surrender. This interests us, Major Pierce whispered. Is this real? Frank hushed her, his eyes fixed on the screen. We propose an alliance, said Ilara. The Arcadian Alliance consists of 11 species across 200 star systems. We have technology, far beyond your current abilities, but we lack your persistence. The image changed, showing designs for what appeared to be weapon systems, ship plans, and defense installations, technology beyond anything humanity had. We will provide you with these designs as a sign of good faith. If your leaders wish to discuss further terms, reply on this frequency. The Krell can be defeated, but only if we stand together. The transmission ended, leaving the room in shocked silence. Frank turned to Pierce. Get me the Joint Chiefs. Now. As she rushed to the communications station, Frank stared at the blank screen, his mind racing. For the first time since the war began, he felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. 3 days later, Frank stood in a secure meeting room deep beneath the Pentagon. Around the table sat the most powerful military and political leaders left on Earth. The room was silent as they all stared at the technical specs displayed on their screens. Are these genuine? Asked General Paul Howard, head of Earth's Combined Defense Forces. Dr. Valerie Nash, Chief of Advanced Weapons Research, nodded. As far as we can tell, yes. The shield technology alone is at least a century beyond our current capabilities. If implemented, it could protect our remaining colonies from Krell bombardment. It could be a trap, said Defense Secretary Andrew Clark. The Arcadians could be working with the Krell. This could be a way to get us to lower our guard. Frank cleared his throat. With all due respect, Mr. Secretary, if the Krell wanted to destroy us completely, they could have done so already. They've been toying with us, testing our defenses. This message suggests there's another player in the game. President Ellen Rivera, her face lined with the stress of leading humanity through its darkest hour, spoke quietly. What do we know about these Arcadians? Almost nothing, Frank admitted. But they knew about New Eden. They've been watching our battles. And they've offered us technology that could change the course of the war. The question is, what do they want in return? General Howard asked. No one gives something for nothing, especially not in wartime. Frank picked up a tablet and played the ambassador's message again. When it reached the part about humanity's fighting style, he paused the video. "They're fascinated by how we fight," he said. "The ambassador said their strategic models couldn't predict our behavior. I think they want to understand us. Or they want to use us as cannon fodder," Secretary Clark muttered. "We don't have many options left," President Rivera said. "Our latest intelligence suggests the Krell are preparing for a push into the Sol system. Earth itself could be under attack within months." The room fell silent as the weight of that statement sank in. "I say we respond," Frank said firmly. "We set up a meeting, hear what they have to say. If their technology is real, and Dr. Nash believes it is, then this could be our only chance." President Rivera looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. "I want a response drafted within the hour. We'll arrange a meeting in neutral space. Perhaps the Jupiter diplomatic station. And Colonel Donnelly, ma'am, you'll head the military delegation. You've been on the front lines, you know what we're facing better than anyone in this room." Frank nodded, trying to hide his surprise. "Yes, Madam President." As the meeting broke up, Frank lingered, studying the Arcadian ship designs. They were unlike anything he'd ever seen, almost organic in their flow, yet clearly built for war. "Do you think they're telling the truth?" Major Pierce asked, coming to stand beside him. "About the Krell destroying 17 civilizations?" Frank considered the question. "I think the universe is a bigger and more dangerous place than we ever imagined, and I think we've just been offered a lifeline." He picked up the communication tablet. It was time to compose humanity's response to their first potential ally in a war they had been losing from the start. "Tell the communications team I want a direct channel to the Arcadian frequency," he told Pierce. "And inform the Joint Chiefs. I'll need a full tactical assessment of our remaining forces. If we're going to form an alliance, we need to know exactly what we bring to the table." As Pierce hurried off, Frank stared once more at the image of Ambassador Alara. Her violet eyes seemed to look right through him, assessing, calculating. "Let's hope you're really on our side," he murmured, "because we're running out of time." The Arcadian diplomatic ship Celestial Harmony was unlike anything Lieutenant Ryan Cooper had ever seen. It looked almost alive, with a pearl-like hull that seemed to pulse with inner light. It made the human ships escorting it into Earth orbit look like toys in comparison. Ryan stood straight in the meeting area of the ISS Armstrong, trying not to fidget as they waited for the Arcadian visitors. Beside him, political and military leaders from Earth's remaining territories whispered, nervously among themselves. General Grace Alvarez, Supreme Commander of Earth's Combined Defense Forces, stood silent with a stone face. When Ryan had been chosen as her assistant for this historic meeting, he had been honored. Now he was scared. "Remember," Grace murmured to him, "watch everything, record everything, trust nothing." Before Ryan could respond, the airlock door opened. The Arcadians were shaped like humans, but clearly alien. Ambassador Alara led the group, tall and thin with those distinctive purple eyes. Behind her came representatives of species Ryan couldn't even begin to describe, a being that seemed made of connecting geometric shapes. A massive, six-limbed figure whose skin changed colors like an octopus, and three identical beings that moved in perfect sync. "Welcome to the Sol system," said President Alan Ward, stepping forward. "On behalf of humanity, we thank you for your offer of help." Alara bowed her head slightly. "The Arcadian Alliance is pleased to meet the people of Earth. As promised, we bring knowledge and technology to help in your fight against our common enemy." One of the synchronized beings stepped forward, holding out a data crystal. "These are the complete plans for our defensive grid and shield harmonics. The Krell have never broken through them." A murmur ran through the human delegation. Shields capable of withstanding Krell weapons would save millions of lives. "And this," said the geometric being, its voice sounding strange, "contains the specifications for our quantum targeting arrays. They will increase your weapon's accuracy by about 340%. President Ward accepted the crystals with slightly shaking hands. "Your generosity is overwhelming. But I must ask, what do you want in return?" Ilara's expression remained calm. As I said in our transmission, the Arcadian Alliance has advanced technology, but lacks your species' unique qualities. We have observed 17 battles where human forces were greatly outnumbered, yet continued fighting long beyond what our models predicted possible. Desperation makes for determined soldiers, General Alvarez said bluntly. No, replied Ilara. It is more than that. The Krell rely on predictability. Their tactical computers analyze enemy patterns and exploit them. But human soldiers adapt, change tactics during battle, make decisions that our logic deems irrational, yet sometimes succeed against overwhelming odds. The color-shifting being spoke, its voice surprisingly musical. We wish for human military advisors to be assigned to Arcadian vessels. We will provide the technology. You will provide the unpredictability. Ryan glanced at General Alvarez, whose expression had grown thoughtful. And in return for this exchange? President Ward asked. Together, said Ilara, we will drive the Krell from human space, and then we will take the fight to them. Hours later, as the human delegation reviewed the terms of the proposed alliance, Ryan found himself alone with General Alvarez. What do you think, Lieutenant? She asked, studying the technical specifications they'd been given. Ryan hesitated. The technology is incredible, ma'am, but I can't help wondering why such an advanced civilization needs us at all. Grace nodded slowly. Exactly the right question, Cooper. She tapped the screen showing the Arcadian proposal. They're afraid of the Krell, have been for centuries. They've been fighting a defensive war, hiding behind their shields. But that's not how you win a war. And they think we know how to win? Ryan asked. No, said Grace, her eyes gleaming with a fierce light. They know we're willing to die trying, and sometimes that makes all the difference. 2 weeks later, Ryan stood in the newly established Joint Command Center in Geneva. The room buzzed with activity as human and Arcadian personnel worked side by side, integrating their technologies and battle strategies. Ambassador Ilara and General Alvarez stood in front of a holographic display of the galaxy, focusing on a glowing red dot. New Eden, Ilara said. The Krell have established their primary forward base there. It is the logical target for our first joint operation. General Alvarez nodded. Agreed. They won't expect us to strike back so soon. And retaking New Eden would be a powerful symbol for our people. Ryan watched as they discussed troop movements and fleet formations. The Arcadians had already begun upgrading Earth's remaining warships with their shield technology. Human engineers worked day and night to understand and implement the alien designs. Lieutenant Cooper, the general called. What's the status of the tactical integration teams? Ryan consulted his tablet. 6 teams deployed to Arcadian command ships, ma'am. Initial reports show some cultural differences in approach, but they're adapting. Cultural differences? Ilara asked, her head tilting slightly. Ryan hesitated, wondering how to phrase it diplomatically. The Arcadian commanders were surprised by our emphasis on creative solutions over maximum survival probability. A slight smile touched Ilara's lips. You mean they were shocked by your willingness to sacrifice? If necessary, General Alvarez said firmly. We've learned the hard way that sometimes the only way to win is to accept losses that would be considered unacceptable under normal circumstances. The geometric Arcadian, whose name Ryan had learned was Nexus, joined the conversation. Our simulations suggest a 73% casualty rate for the New Eden operation if we use human aggressive tactics. And what's the probability of success? Alvarez asked. 68%, Nexus replied, compared to 42% using standard Arcadian defensive protocols. The general nodded. Those are odds we can work with. Ryan watched the exchange with growing understanding. The Arcadians had superior technology but were constrained by their own caution. Humans had inferior technology but were willing to take risks that the Arcadians found unthinkable. Together, they might just have a chance. When do we move on New Eden? Ryan asked. 3 Earth weeks, Ilara answered. Time enough to retrofit. Your primary battle fleet and train joint strike teams. General Alvarez turned to Ryan. Cooper, You'll be our liaison with the Arcadian command ship. I need someone who understands both their technology and our tactical approach. Ryan felt a weight settle on his shoulders. Yes, ma'am. As the meeting continued, Ryan found himself standing beside one of the synchronized Arcadians, who had introduced himself as Tria 1. Your people are very strange, Lieutenant Cooper, Tria 1 said quietly. You know you face almost certain defeat, yet you continue to fight as if victory is possible. Ryan considered this. Maybe that's why we're still here. If we accepted defeat as certain, we would have surrendered months ago. Tria 1's eyes, a deeper purple than Alara's, studied Ryan's face. And is that why you will win, because you refuse to accept the possibility of losing? No, Ryan replied. We'll win because now we're not fighting alone. For the first time, Ryan felt something beyond hope, something that felt almost like certainty. The Krell had never faced an enemy like humanity before. And now, with Arcadian technology backing human determination, they were about to learn a hard lesson. The tide was about to turn. The Arcadian training facility on Europa was a wonder of alien engineering. A massive complex built under the icy surface of Jupiter's moon. Human soldiers arrived by the thousands, assigned to train alongside their new allies and learn to use the advanced technology being added to Earth's defense systems. Captain Samantha Reeves had never expected to find herself teaching alien warriors how to fight. Yet here she was, facing a group of Arcadian military officers who watched her with looks ranging from curiosity to doubt. The problem, Sam said, walking in front of the glowing tactical display, is that you've been fighting defensively for too long. The Krell adapt to patterns. If you keep doing the same thing, even if that thing is better technology, they'll eventually find a weakness. The Arcadian commander, a tall being named Thelios, whose skin had a metallic shine, tilted his head. Our simulations show that aggressive tactics result in 43% higher death rates. Sam nodded. At first, yes. But the Krell expect you to retreat when losses mount. They've programmed that expectation into their battle plans. She changed the holographic controls, showing a replay of the Battle of Tauceti. When we kept fighting here despite taking heavy losses, we disrupted their entire tactical system. For 17 minutes, they stopped advancing because they couldn't understand why we weren't retreating. And in those 17 minutes, asked another Arcadian, we evacuated an additional 12,000 civilians, Sam replied quietly. Every minute counts when you're fighting for survival. Across the facility, other exchanges were taking place. In the engineering bay, human technicians marveled at Arcadian quantum drives while explaining the backup systems humans built into their ships, systems that kept them working even after taking damage that would disable an Arcadian vessel. In the medical wing, Dr. Nathan Diaz worked with Arcadian biotechnicians to develop new combat drugs that would allow human soldiers to connect with Arcadian neural networks without suffering brain damage. The strain on your neural pathways would be severe, explained the Arcadian medical officer, a being whose name translated roughly as healer. We'll manage, Nathan replied, injecting himself with the experimental compound. We always do. The most dramatic changes came in the combat simulators. When Arcadian officers first watched human special forces in training, they were visibly disturbed by the intensity and brutality of the exercises. Your soldiers continue fighting even when the simulation shows they should be disabled, noted an Arcadian observer, Lieutenant Diana Wright, bleeding from a cut above her eye after a particularly hard training session, shrugged. That's the point. The body can go way beyond what the mind thinks is possible. We train to push past those limits. But at what cost? The Arcadian asked. Diana's expression hardened. When the choice is extinction, no cost is too high. As weeks turned to months, the integration sped up. Human engineers worked day and night to add Arcadian technology to Earth's remaining fleet. Arcadian shield generators were installed on civilian centers. Human tactical experts trained Arcadian commanders in adaptive warfare, and in orbit around Jupiter, the combined fleet grew, crystal-like Arcadian vessels alongside the darker, more angular ships of Earth. Different in design, different in philosophy, but united in purpose. On the eve of the campaign to retake New Eden, the first major offensive against the Krell, Sam found herself standing beside Thelios, looking out at the assembled armada. "Will it be enough?" the Arcadian asked quietly. Sam thought of Earth, of the colonies they'd lost, of the millions who had died. "It has to be," she replied, "because we're not fighting for victory anymore. We're fighting for survival." Thelios studied her for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "That is where you are wrong, Captain Reeves. The Arcadians fight for survival. Humans—" He gestured at the fleet before them. "Humans fight to win." The next morning, Sam stood on the bridge of the Arcadian command vessel Light of Dawn. Around her, both human and Arcadian crew prepared for the jump to New Eden. The ship hummed with energy as its quantum drive spooled up. Fleet Admiral Derek Scott, commander of the human forces, appeared on the main view screen. "All ships report. Ready, Captain Reeves? The Arcadians?" Sam glanced at Thelios, who nodded. "Ready, Admiral. Quantum jump plotted and locked in." "Very good." Admiral Scott's face was solemn. "This is the moment, people. The first time we take the fight to the Krell. Remember your training. Remember what we're fighting for." He paused. "Jump on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark." Space twisted around them as the quantum drives engaged. For a breathless moment, Sam felt as if she were being pulled in all directions at once. Then reality snapped back into place, and the New Eden system spread out before them. "Arrival complete," reported an Arcadian officer. "All vessels accounted for." "Krell defense grid is active," added Lieutenant Greg Foster, one of the human tactical officers. "They've detected us." Sam moved to the tactical display. "Right on schedule, launch fighter squadrons and activate shields." The battle plan was bold, relying on both Arcadian technology and human unpredictability. The first wave of fighters, small nimble craft piloted by humans but equipped with Arcadian weapons, streaked toward the Krell sensor stations. "Fighters approaching targets," Greg reported. "Krell response vessels launching." Sam watched as the human pilots executed maneuvers that made even the Arcadian officers gasp. They flew directly into the Krell defensive fire, taking hits that would have destroyed their old ships but were absorbed by the new Arcadian shields. "Sensor stations 1 through 7 destroyed," Greg announced, a note of triumph in his voice. "Krell fleet is scrambling but disorganized." Thelios turned to Sam, his metallic skin reflecting the glow of the tactical displays. "Your pilots fly as if they have no fear of death." "They know the stakes," Sam replied. "And now it's time for Phase 2. She activated the ship-wide comm. "All assault teams, prepare for ground deployment. Remember the plan, hold the control, center for 17 minutes. That's how long the virus needs to upload." As the transport vessels prepared to launch, Sam caught Thelios watching her. "What is it?" she asked. "I have studied your species' military history," he said. "You have a saying, 'No plan survives contact with the enemy.'" Sam smiled grimly. "That's why we have backup plans, and backup plans for our backup plans. And if all those fail, then we improvise," she said. "That's what humans do best." The transport ships launched, streaking toward the surface of New Eden. Above them, the space battle intensified as the main Krell fleet arrived to engage the human Arcadian armada. Sam watched the tactical display, her hand unconsciously moving to the Arcadian communication device at her throat, her link to the ground teams. Everything depended on this mission. If they could retake New Eden, it would be the first Krell defeat in recorded history. "For Earth," she whispered. "For all of us." Beside her, Thelios straightened to his full height. "The Krell think victory is certain," he said. "They are about to learn otherwise." The battle for New Eden began in fire and chaos. The combined human Arcadian fleet appeared at the edge of the system, immediately launching fighter squadrons and turning on defensive shields. Krell sensor stations exploded under the first wave of attacks, giving the Allies precious minutes before the main Krell force responded. Admiral Jack Hayes stood on the bridge of the USS Intrepid, now enhanced with Arcadian technology. Beside him, Arcadian Fleet Commander Zorax watched the neural net tactical display that linked all Allied vessels. Krell forces mobilizing, reported Lieutenant Amy Chen. 300 vessels detected on intercept course. Jack nodded grimly. Right on schedule. All ships, form battle formation Delta. Arcadian vessels, take position behind the human vanguard. Zorax looked alarmed. Admiral, your ships will take the main force of the Krell attack. The casualties will be acceptable, Jack finished. Trust the plan, Commander. As the Krell fleet approached, the human ships accelerated toward them, a seemingly suicidal charge. Krell energy weapons fired out, several human vessels exploding in silence. But the remaining ships pressed on, closing the distance rapidly. Now, Jack ordered. At his command, the human ships scattered in all directions, their movements seemingly random and chaotic. The Krell fleet's fire became erratic as their targeting computers struggled to predict the humans' next moves. In that moment of confusion, the Arcadian vessels emerged from behind, their advanced weapons finding gaps in the Krell formation. Quantum torpedoes tore through silicon hulls. Focused energy beams cut Krell command links. It's working, Zorax said, amazement in his voice. The Krell are adapting, Jack interrupted, pointing to the display. Look, the Krell vessels were regrouping, forming a defensive sphere. Their return fire became more coordinated, claiming more human ships. Phase 2, Jack ordered. Ground. Tamed, you're up. On the surface of New Eden, what had appeared to be abandoned human settlements suddenly came alive with activity. For months, resistance fighters had hidden among the ruins, waiting for this moment. Colonel Eric Russell led a team of 30 human soldiers and 10 Arcadian specialists toward the main Krell ground base, a massive structure that controlled the automated defense grid the Krell had established around the planet. Remember, Eric told his team as they moved through the underground passages, we need to hold the control center for 17 minutes. That's how long it will take to upload the virus into their system. 17 minutes against superior forces, said the Arcadian specialist Lyra. The chance of success is... Don't tell me the odds, Eric cut her off. Just focus on the mission. They emerged into the lower levels of the Krell base, immediately meeting resistance. The Krell ground forces, 8-limbed armored creatures with weapons built into their exoskeletons, screeched in alarm. The battle was brutal in close quarters. Human soldiers used tactics the Krell had never encountered, deliberately taking wounds to create openings for their teammates. The Arcadians, protected by personal shield technology, provided covering fire as the humans advanced step by bloody step. Eric took a glancing hit to his shoulder, but kept moving forward. 10 more meters to the control center. Above the planet, the space battle had reached its critical phase. The Krell had recognized the human tactics and adjusted their formation, focusing fire on the Arcadian vessels with their valuable shield technology. They're targeting our support ships, Jack said, watching as an Arcadian cruiser exploded under concentrated Krell fire. All human vessels execute Maneuver Omega. What followed defied conventional space combat tactics. Human ships deliberately placed themselves in the line of fire, using their hulls to shield Arcadian vessels. As the humans took damage, they drove their wounded ships directly into Krell formations, not as suicide runs, but as calculated disruptions. This is madness, Zorax whispered, watching as human captains risked everything to create openings for the Alliance. This is humanity fighting for its home, Jack replied. On the surface, Eric's team had reached the control center, establishing a defensive perimeter, as Lyra began the complex process of uploading the virus that would disable the Krell defense grid. How much longer? Eric asked, firing at Krell reinforcements attempting to breach their position. 12 minutes, Lyra replied, her hands moving across the alien interface. But Krell reinforcements will overwhelm us in approximately 7 minutes. Eric touched his comm unit. Hayes, we need more time. In orbit, Jack received the message and made the hardest decision of his career. Intrepid to all remaining human vessels. Implement protocol sacrifice. One by one, human ships turned toward the planet, accelerating to maximum speed. They didn't target the Krell fleet. Instead, they aimed for the automated defense platforms in the planet's lower orbit. Each collision destroyed both the human ship and the Krell technology, creating a cascade of failures in the planetary defense system. "What are you doing?" Zorax demanded. "Giving our ground team the time they need," Jack said, his voice steady despite the cost in human lives playing out before him. In the control center, Lyra looked up in shock as the facility's power fluctuated. The orbital defenses, they're failing. Eric didn't need to ask how. He knew what his comrades in space had done. "How much more time do you need?" 3 minutes, Lyra said, working faster. "You'll have it," Eric promised, as he and his remaining soldiers prepared for the final Krell assault. The next 3 minutes were the longest of Eric's life. His team fought with desperate courage, human and Arcadian alike falling to hold their position. When the last Krell attacker fell, only Eric, Lyra, and 3 others remained standing. "It's done," Lyra announced, her voice weak from her own injuries. "The virus is uploaded. The Krell command system is compromised." In space, the effect was immediate and dramatic. Krell vessels began firing on each other, their targeting systems corrupted. Communications between Krell units broke down completely. The perfect coordination that had made them so deadly dissolved into chaos. "All ships, press the advantage," Jack ordered. "Drive them out of the system." The combined fleet surged forward, Arcadian precision weapons complemented by human determination. The Krell, unable to adapt to the simultaneous failures in their system, began to retreat. Hours later, as the last Krell ship fled the system, Jack stood in the ruins of New Eden's capital city. Beside him, Zorax surveyed the destruction. "The cost was high," the Arcadian said quietly. Jack nodded, watching as human and Arcadian medical teams treated the wounded. "It always is." "But we won," Zorax continued. "For the first time in our history, the Krell were driven back." He turned to face Jack. "Your people fight like no species we have ever encountered." "Because we have to," Jack replied simply. "This is just the beginning, Commander. New Eden was the first step. Next, we take back all that we've lost. And then we take the fight to the Krell homeworld," Zorax finished. "The Arcadian Alliance will stand with humanity until the end." As the sun set over the battlefield, human and Arcadian soldiers worked side by side, rebuilding what had been destroyed. The war was far from over, but for the first time since the Krell had appeared, victory seemed possible. Defeat had been certain until the relentless human soldiers arrived, and now the galaxy would never be the same.